Hello, my name is Anna. Cut me some slack with the junk back there. We just moved in, so things have not all found their forever homes yet, but I graduated from the University of Alabama in May. I was a social work major. I got minors in human development and family studies and Spanish. That's just all to say I've been through college. I've had many different roommates in my time at college, and I've decided to just make some videos for people either in college or entering college to give some of the things that I learned throughout college, so maybe you can learn it a little bit easier than I did, or just have some tips going in. I actually just finished filming the first video of this series, and I didn't even do an outfit change. So if you go watch that video, know that this is like 30 seconds later, so hello. But as you know from the title, this one is about roommates and a roommate tip. My main goal with this video is, you know, the videos that are like the horror roommate stories, worst roommate in the world, all of those videos. My goal is for you not to be the subject of one of those videos. These roommate tips are for you to not be bad. Not that you're going to be, but being a roommate is hard, especially if you have only ever lived with your family before. Then living with peers is very different and everyone's getting used to it. But I think the thing that's important to start with is whether you have talked to your roommate like Facebook or something and know who they are and think you're gonna be a perfect match going in, or if they're totally random, or if they're your best friend since you were 5, there is about an equal chance of all of those situations that the roommate situation will be really great or that it will not be so great. It really doesn't matter whether you know someone before or not. If you've never lived together, then it changes. It changes when you live together, because, you know, home is the place where you go at the end of the day, where you don't want to put up a front, where maybe you don't want to do your dishes. We'll talk about that later. And so the people that you share your home with really can make or break it. And my goal is for you to make it for someone else. Be the best roommate in the world. Maybe that's what I should title this. How to be the best roommate in the whole world. I think something that's really important, and I rarely did this. I had 3 years of college, and so lived with different people those entire 3 years. It ranged from total strangers to friends to other friends to totally random. And honestly, genuinely, the best friend that I made of my roommates was the one that was totally random. So Kirsten, I love you. But it is so important whenever you begin living with someone, honestly within the first week, to just talk about your expectations for the rooming situation. And if you live in a dorm, typically the RAs will kind of make you do this. There might be a form you fill out to talk about it, but having your expectations out in the open is so important. Even if you don't know exactly what you want yet, just to talk about what you think you want on the cleanliness scale, on the noise scale, on the doing household chores scale, on the how much you want to hang out, all of that. Just having your expectations out in the open is really important, because then if something ever comes up in the future and you are upset at a roommate or you want something to change, if they have no idea what you wanted in the first place, then there's no way that they can fulfill that for you or make any effort to fulfill that for you if they have no idea what you are wanting from this rooming situation. And like I said, if this is your first time living with roommates, you might have no idea what you want. Like, you might think, oh yeah, it's totally okay if they're noisy until midnight, and then week 2 comes around and you're thinking, actually I don't really want that. If your expectations change, just like let your roommate know and say, I know I said this before, but I think now it would really mean a lot to me if we could do this, and just have a conversation about it. It might require compromise, but it's so important to communicate verbally, explicitly, so that there's no passive aggression, so that there's no up in the air, because you might be thinking, oh my gosh, I have the worst roommate in the world. She always, I want to use myself as an example, she always dumps her backpack in the living room and leaves it there for days on end instead of taking it to her own room. And you might be thinking, oh, that's so cluttery, that's so rude, this is our shared space. But if you never told your roommate, and this isn't a real story by the way, no one ever got mad at me for that, but if you never told your roommate that you don't like that, then how do you know that they're not willing to make the change to satisfy you? They can't just assume what you want and what you don't want. So it's so important to talk about your expectations is the main point of this whole hour-long spiel I just went on. I kind of already touched on this, but tip number, I've already lost count, 2, 3, is communicate. Because like I said, if your roommates don't know what you want, they can't do it. And that's just like point blank done. And that would resolve so many conflicts if you just talk about it. And maybe you talk about it and your roommate really doesn't receive it well and doesn't want to do it. Then at least you know. Then at least you know that they're doing it despite you, and you're not just assuming that when really they'd be willing to make a change for you. It's just so important to talk. And this means expectations, but this also just means in the moment. Like, if you have a test the next day and your roommate is being very loud and you really want your sleep, just shoot them a quick text or just say something and say, hey, maybe you don't know this, but I have a test tomorrow and I would really like to sleep right now. Is it okay if you just quiet down? Because they, again, might have no idea unless you communicate. You can't just assume that your roommate knows something that you haven't told them. And you don't need to silently suffer, because like I said in the very beginning, this is your home too. This is their home too, but this is also your home, and so you deserve to experience it well, to live in it well. So So don't silently suffer. Even if you're not a confrontation person, it doesn't have to be confrontation. It can literally just be a sentence saying, hey, would you mind being a little bit quieter? And they can say yes, they can say no, but they're not gonna know you want that unless you say that. And so it's really important to say that. Another tip is just honestly common courtesy, common sense, be a courteous person. If you walk in and your roommate is asleep, let them sleep, be quiet, like just be respectful. I think that's one of the biggest tips, just be a respectful person, don't be rude. If your roommate in the online college times is taking a test in the room, let them. Maybe remove yourself from the room so they can just have the best testing environment they can. It's okay to sacrifice a little bit so your roommate can live the best life they can in their home, and then they will be more likely to do it in return if you are making the efforts to just be a courteous person, be a respectful person, go out of your way for them, so then they can also go out of their way for you and just live well together by being nice people. It's such a basic tip, but it just doesn't happen all the time. So be courteous, be respectful. I feel like I don't have to explain that much because you know what that means. Just be a nice person. You are so much more likely to have a great roommate experience if you are just nice and kind and willing to help your roommate out and willing to make the living space great for them, then they are much more willing to do the same for you in return. One more tip before I get to the actual practical tips, like to-dos of being a roommate, is to just put your maximum effort in. And I know that's hard and you might not always want to do that, but for instance, with cleaning up around or with being the respectful person, put your maximum effort in, because you never know what they're doing on the down low, what they're doing that you can't see for you. There's a phenomenon that happens that I learned in one of my interpersonal relationship classes. It typically happens in relationships, like romantic relationships, but then it also just happens with roommates and roommate situations. But you are always going to take so much more note of the things that you are doing in a common space or in a relationship than the things that the other person is doing. So even if you guys are doing the entire exact same amount of cleaning, chores, etc., you are always going to feel like you're doing more because you know the effort you put in, whereas you feel like they didn't do that much. And it's going to be the exact same vice versa, the exact same. And so it's just important to always put your max effort in and to try to have faith and confidence that your roommate is at least doing something. Try to give them more credit than you naturally want to give them, because you're naturally going to gravitate towards getting them less credit than they really truly deserve, if that makes sense. And really, it does stink if you are doing your max effort and your roommate is not. But until they prove to you that they're not, just try to believe the best in them, because again, if your attitude is positive towards them and helpful towards them, you are so much more likely to have a good, positive roommate interaction, roommate situation, living experience than if you are cold and passive aggressive and annoyed and not telling them. And we would much rather you have a great living situation in college. Okay, so some actual practical tips. Before you get to college, practice opening and closing cabinets and doors silently. And I don't mean quietly, I mean silently. You can do it. It is possible. And I think that is one of the biggest noise complaints that I have had as a roommate, with other roommates. Do not just pull your door shut behind you and let it slam. Don't just drop a kitchen cabinet and let it slam if someone else is doing something, anything, because all of those things, it is so possible to do it silently. And so it's your job to do so you don't bother your other roommates. Honestly, this was important enough that I felt like I should do a little demonstration so you know what I mean. And just so you know, I'm not going to alter the volume at all in these clips. I'm not going to tone it down like I usually would to make it not be loud in your headphones. Okay, what not to do? Nope, never. Ready? One more time. That's the no. What you can do, keep your hand on the cabinet until it is on closed. You're good. Another practical tip, there is a difference between clutter and dirt. Talk to your roommate about how much clutter is okay. Some people couldn't care less about clutter. Some people, it really does affect how they experience where they're living. So talk to your roommate about how much clutter is okay. And that might mean clothes somewhere. That might mean your backpack somewhere. That might mean your shoes on the floor. But there's a difference between clutter and dirt dirt is never okay. If you are dirty, fix it. If you are cluttery, compromise, talk about it, figure out a way that works for both of you. But if you are dirty and gross, that needs to be cleaned up, fixed, because that's not fair to someone sharing your living space if you are dirty. That being said, let's put extra emphasis on the bathroom. The bathroom, max effort needs to go into. Maybe if you accidentally forget to wipe off the kitchen counter after you spill something, that's forgivable. That happens sometimes, but don't be dirty in the bathroom. If you are a female and you have trash from a tampon or pad or whatever it is, that goes in the trash can. There are too many stories of roommates just leaving those around for their other roommates to come into and try to use the bathroom and there's gross all over. No, wrap it up, put it in the trash can, that's on you. Your hair in the shower, that's on you to clean up. The bathroom, no grace. Practice right now if you're going to college or you're moving with roommates, practice right now having a spotless bathroom. It might not stay spotless, but there's no grace for dirty in the bathroom because that's gross and that's not fair to whoever you're living with. This is a little bit less serious of one, but I just think it's a common courtesy and I think it helps roommate relationships. But anytime you're leaving, tell your roommate where you're going, and it doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm going to this place, I'm gonna be here for this amount of time exactly, I'm gonna be with these people. But if you're walking out the door, be like, hey, going to grab some coffee, bye. It's just nice. And then they know like, oh, maybe she's gonna be gone for this amount of time, and they'll know like how long they're gonna be alone in there. They'll know where you're going. Like, it just, you don't have to give them every detail, but I just think it's a nice thing to do. And it's weird if you were sitting like right by the door and someone just like ups and leaves without saying anything and you're just kind of, okay, bye. That's weird. So common courtesy, just let your roommate know where you're going. I think that is just the smallest thing that can really just benefit your roommate relationship. Like I said, my goal with this video is that you are not a horror story roommate and that you can put this effort in to make your roommate relationship better, because you got to put effort in, especially in the very beginning, to make that living situation good. And if you have a good living situation, it is going to make the whole rest of your life that much better. If you have any questions or you need any other tips, feel free to comment them. I'll do the best I can. Like I said, I've had 3 different living situations, different issues and perks and pros and cons and all of them. And so not that I'm the most experienced, but I am happy to help you. And I hope that you will take these tips to heart and not let any roommate horror story videos be made about you. I'll see you next time.